Hello and welcome to another episode of Threat Update. I'm Kilian Englert, and joining me today is Ryan O'Boyle. Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, Kilian. Doing well. Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks for being on. Ryan, since we have you on, that means that we have a really great cloud topic for everyone today. This episode is going to cover our 2021 SaaS risk report. So we went through and we used our Data Advantage Cloud solution to collect up a lot of really interesting anonymized data about what we're seeing in the SaaS world. So this is based on about 200,000 identities analyzed and hundreds of millions of cloud assets we looked at to develop this report. And we have a couple really kind of key things. So Ryan, if you wouldn't mind, I know you are an expert in Data Advantage Cloud. What platforms do we typically monitor in this situation before we get into the specific risks?
Yeah, definitely. We have support for quite a few different cloud applications. When we're thinking about the SaaS world, we have collaborative data repositories like Google Workspace and Box, really business critical applications like Salesforce and Okta and Slack. Of course, also things like GitHub, Jira, Zoom. And then on the infrastructure side, today we're really focused in the AWS space. So that's a big one for us.
So it's a pretty broad coverage of a lot of different platforms that we have here. So a lot of great data that came out of it. I picked two specific topics out of the report. And if anybody's interested, I'll link to the full report in the description below. But I wanted to pick your brain about two topics in particular that I think folks will find really interesting and enlightening. The first topic, based on analysis, we found that 3 out of 4 cloud identities belonging to external contractors remain active after the contractors have left the organization. That just sounds pretty scary to me here. Ryan, can you give us a little bit of background on the impact of this and what could happen or could go wrong in this case?
Yeah, definitely. When we think about these cloud services, it's not just internal users anymore, right? We have external accounts. It's kind of the point of having a lot of these different types of data repositories. And we might have trusted third parties that we give access to our data. We might have, external users that receive access to data through sharing links that are created. The problem is when this data is shared out to one of these third parties, it creates a direct entitlement on that object, let's say file or folder if we're talking about Google or Box, for example. And then as long as that permission is still there and that direct entitlement maintains its access, that third party contractor still has access to the data. So even if they're no longer working with the organization, if that data was shared with them, let's say, and they still have that valid account, could be their email address, could be their Gmail, they still have access to our corporate data. It's a little scary.
That's definitely scary. And now that we've scared the whole audience, what recommendations do you have for them to address this, or how would they go about looking at this or remediating it?
Yeah, it's a couple different things. One, it's first focusing on the domains and the external accounts that have access to our data, triaging the permissions of all the different objects in these different cloud services, understanding where do we have internal users versus external users, and then we'll receive external accounts that maybe haven't generated activity in a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great for review. After somebody leaves the organization for 60, 90 days, they really shouldn't have access to our data anymore. So once we've identified those accounts, we should go out there and remove those entitlements, stop those sharing links depending upon the service, break that connection to the external accounts.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's a really good recommendation. Following right on from that, you talked about sharing and sharing links and how easy it is to collaborate. The other statistic I picked out that I wanted to cover is really around that. In our report, we discovered that 15% of employees are transferring business critical data to personal cloud accounts. That just on the outset sounds like probably not so great. Can you go over a little bit of the background and the impact that this could have and how we get to the situation?
Definitely. If you think about this logically, it's a really easy thing to do. How many of us out there have some sort of personal email address, a personal Gmail, some sort of personal account that we use on the side? And oftentimes these accounts are cached in our browsers. We use them day in and day out across multiple devices. And as we are starting to move our corporate data into these collaborative data repositories, we're allowing users to potentially share that data out. So it's really easy for them to share that data with something like a personal Gmail, for example. And again, that brings us back to the same conversation as the contractor. We're creating a direct entitlement on that object. They have access to that data as long as that permission is there. And in theory, this can also lead to some really scary scenarios like offboarding gaps, or sometimes we call it inconsistent offboarding. A user leaves the organization, we turn off their corporate accounts, we would expect for them to no longer have access to corporate data, yet they still do because that data was shared out to their personal Gmail account at some point in time.
Makes sense. So what can organizations do about this type of personal account sharing?
Again, it's really understanding your cloud permissions, looking at all of your critical areas of data, all of your sensitive data found in these different collaborative data repositories, triaging who can access every single file and folder, and then understanding where do we have these external accounts that are maintaining access, triaging those accounts, figuring out, are they third parties, contractors, do they link back to an internal user as a personal account, and then figuring out the ones that are no longer being used or shouldn't be used, right? And then nipping those connections in the bud. Let's close off those sharing links.
Most definitely. This was really eye-opening, and reading the entire report, there are so many great pieces of information in there. If anybody is interested, as I mentioned earlier on, I will include a link to it in the description. Download it, take a look for yourself. There are many more stats here and many more recommendations about that. But Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time today to walk us through this and enlighten us and give us some recommendations to better secure our cloud repositories. And thank you all, of course, for watching. We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing to the channel, throwing us a like, or maybe even leaving a comment. So once again, Ryan, thank you so much for joining. Thank you all for watching. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.
Thanks all.